What's up guys, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make Space Invaders in under 10 minutes with Java and LibGDX. If you have any questions or problems with the tutorial, join my Discord server in the description and I'll help you figure it out. This tutorial took super long to make, so if it helps you, please drop a like and subscribe too. Without any further ado, let's hop into the video. To follow this tutorial, you're going to need to have LibGDX and Java set up correctly. So if you don't have LibGDX or Java set up correctly, LibGDX has some really easy to follow and concise instructions on their webpage, which I'll link in the description. The first thing I'm going to do is to delete the default image in the assets folder and replace it with my 3 images of an alien, a player, and a bullet. You can make your own images or you can find some online. Next, I'm going to create a player class which will contain all the data and methods needed for our player. I'm going to create a vector2 which represents our position, and a sprite which we'll use to draw the player. We'll instantiate the sprite with the texture passed in the constructor, and we'll instantiate the position at the center of the screen, and we'll set the scale of the sprite to 4. In the draw method, we'll set the position every frame and then draw the sprite. Now we'll create a player in the main class, and voila, we have it on screen. If you haven't noticed though, the sprite is only halfway on screen, and we'll have to change some parameters to fix this. Go back into your player class and we'll modify the initial position of the sprite. So we're going to change it to sprite.getScale times sprite.getHeight / 2, which is half the height of the sprite. And there we go, it's fully on screen. I'm not really liking the colors, so I'm going to change the background to black and make sure the sprite is green. We're going to change the initializer to make sure that the sprite is green. And there, it looks much more like Space Invaders. To create the player movement, we're going to create an update method. In the update method, we're going to test if the keys A and D are down to see if we should move the player left or right. Then we're going to add a speed parameter which we'll set to the default of 500. And finally, we'll call the update method in the draw function. And there we have our player moving. However, you'll notice the problem is that we can move out of bounds. To prevent this, we're going to check if the position of the player is smaller than 0 and set it to 0. And now we've prevented it on the left side. However, you can see that only half of the sprite is prevented from going outside, so we're just going to add sprite.getWidth times sprite.getScaleX, and that should fix it, yeah. Now we have to do the same thing for the right side of the window. The only thing we need to change for the right side is instead of seeing if the sprite is less than 0, we test if it is greater than the width of the window. We also need to add half the sprite instead of subtracting because right is positive. And there you see, we fixed it. Now we've gotten the player movement done, we're going to start adding in the player shooting mechanic. We're going to create a vector2 position bullet parameter which controls the position of the bullet, and a speed bullet parameter which controls the speed of a bullet. Then we're going to create a sprite bullet parameter that draws the bullet. Then we're going to move the bullet upwards with the speed bullet parameter and the delta time parameter. And when the player clicks the left mouse button, then the bullet will be teleported to the player, and thus it will look like it's being shot. And now we have to actually add the bullet texture in the main class so it works. However, our bullet is not coming from the center of the sprite's width, so we have to fix that by adding an offset. However, after we've done that, you'll notice another issue, which is that if you spam click it, the bullet will just be teleported back and it won't seem like an actual bullet. To fix this, we're going to add an extra condition that the bullet must be out of the screen by testing the Y position if it is over the height. And now it works. No matter how much you spam click, the bullet must be off the screen before it comes back. Now we've gotten the player done, we're going to create a class called Alien. And we're going to copy in all the imports from the player because that's all we need. And then we're going to use some of the same parameters as the player, except we get to initialize the position from the main class. While we're adding in these parameters, I just like to say that if the video is too fast-paced, you can just watch it on slower speed in YouTube, or you can just pause it. Now we're ready to instantiate the aliens in the main class. We're going to create 2 parameters called the width of the aliens and the height of the aliens. so that we know the dimensions of how we're going to instantiate them. Next, we're going to create an array of aliens and instantiate it with the width times the height. And we're going to start adding them in using a nested for loop of y and x. And we're going to have a spacing variable which helps the aliens be separated from each other. Finally, we'll instantiate the aliens and give them a color of green. In the draw function, we're going to make it so that we draw each of the aliens using a for loop. However, we forgot to give spacing a value, and now it has a value. After that, we're going to have to center the aliens. So we're going to add the width divided by 2 and the height. And then finally, offset the aliens by their respective dimensions, and we can now see that they're centered correctly. However, the aliens cannot be shot yet, so we're going to test to see if the bullet sprite overlaps the alien sprite. This will give us if we can kill the aliens or not, and then we'll only draw the aliens if they're still alive. Now we have another issue, which is the bullet goes straight through the aliens and kills them in a row. So what we have to do is make the bullet's position a really high number right after it hits an alien. Now there's an even greater issue, which is the bullet doesn't seem to hit the other aliens once it hits the ones at the bottom. So we have to test if the aliens are still alive before we test to see if they're being shot. And this works perfectly. Next, we're going to add a little bit of movement to the aliens. First, we have to define the bounding box that the currently alive aliens occupy so we can tell when they reverse direction and move down. We will do this with 4 ints representing the box. Every update, we set the minimum to a very high number and the maximum to a small number, which is 0. Next, we see if the x position of the alien relative to the index inside the array is smaller than the minimum or larger than the maximum, and update the values accordingly to obtain the bounds of the alive aliens. I mistyped what is supposed to be the value of index y, and you can replace it with what is on screen. It will be fixed later, but just to give you a heads up. Now we're going to get the aliens to actually move, and we're going to do this through a vector2 offset, which will move the position of the alien based on the initial position added with the offset. We're going to create a new position initial variable in the player class and initialize it to the position in the constructor. And now we update the position based on the offset and the initial position. Next, we add a direction variable, which will tell which way the aliens are moving horizontally, right or left. And you can see they're moving, but they go out of bounds. Now we're going to use our bounding box variables, the max aliens, min aliens, etc. to tell when we change direction so that they do not go out of bounds. Now we can use the alien's position, which is on the bounds of the box, both minimum and maximum, and detect if they are outside of the screen, and if they are, then we'll change the direction of the aliens, and they seem to not be going out of bounds anymore. Next thing we do is add a line of code that makes it so that the aliens will go down right after they hit the edge, and it seems to be working, but we need to make it smaller because it's too hard right now. Yes, that seems much better. Next, the aliens are moving a little too fast for my liking, so we're going to make it so that they increase in speed over time. As you can see, each time they hit the wall, they become a little... Oh, that was an error. To fix this error, all you have to do is first move this line of code above the if statement, and then check if the aliens are alive before you determine their bounds. And it works. Now we need to make it so that the aliens regenerate when they die. So we're gonna count the amount of alive aliens, and then if all of them are dead, then we're gonna reset the offset and set every alien to be alive. Then add this line of code, which will kill the player if they collide with the aliens. I forgot to record this, so here it is. Now, as I've previously mentioned, I also mistyped on index y. Now we're just going to fix it, so in case you didn't catch that. And finally, right after we replace the aliens and make them alive again, we have to return and end the sprite batch. and set the speed of the aliens back to 100, and now we finished.